because you are not going to reach your goals, crush your debt, become the person and the professional that you could potentially be without owning your practice. While you're in dental school and soon after, if I was in your shoes, I would be getting exposure and practice to doing everything. I would be that pesky student. I'm sure you all can think of that person in your class who wants to talk to every professor and do everything and shadow everyone. You probably should be kind of like that person.
Sicker than your average, sicker than your average. Sicker than your average, sicker than your average.
What's up, everybody? This is Matt of The Lifestyle Practice. Got a bit of a unique podcast episode for you all this week. This is geared towards dental students and young doctors who are listening to our podcast. This is a recording of a Zoom discussion I had with the Dental Business Club at the University of Texas, San Antonio's Dental School. We had an awesome discussion about why and how to get into practice ownership early on in your dental career. So dental students, current associates, young doctors, even if you already own a practice or you just jumped into one, I think you'll love this episode. Reach out to me via email. You know how to do that, matt@thelifestylepractice.com. If you're a dental student and you've got a similar club in your school and you'd like to virtually meet to talk about ownership or any number of topics that you've probably heard us discuss on the podcast, reach out to me via email as well, and maybe we can set something up for your group at your school. If you like the podcast, if you like this episode, the best compliment you can give us is dropping us a review on Spotify or the Apple Store, or just sharing it with a friend or a colleague. That's enough chatting. Let's jump in.
All right. So, like I said, this is my team. These are my guys, Derek and Steve, my partners. We are The Lifestyle Practice. I know some of y'all are probably familiar with us. Some of y'all might not be. You might be on our email list. You might be a listener of our podcast, but this is us. We help dentists like you all are about to be elevate their lifestyles and careers through practice ownership. Through our content, like our podcast, that's probably our biggest way that we reach people these days. Through our mastermind groups, our online academy course that we have, and then through one-on-one coaching. We're all practice owners who have benefited immensely from finding a coach or a mentor early in our careers. So sure, I guess we're biased towards finding that type of relationship with someone. But man, it can be such a great thing. We've each done things a little bit differently in our careers. So Derek, the one who's standing, he bought a practice right out of school and actually recently sold it within the last year. If you've listened to the podcast, you know what's going on with him. He's going around the country in an RV with his family and his kids, which is just awesome. Sold his practice at 35, and who knows what the next step is for him, but he's all in on TLP and doing some awesome stuff. Steve on the lower right, he also did the same, found a practice to buy right out of school, grew it from low six figures to a multi-million-dollar practice now. And he has probably the most efficient, and well-performing low overhead practice that any of us have ever seen. It's crazy what he's able to do. And then there's me. I did things a little differently. I started practice from scratch right out of school. Signed the lease on my practice space the day after I graduated, actually. Got things going and finally opened doors about 10 months after graduation. And now we've been open for about 6 years and grown to a similar size like these two guys. So lots of different ways to do it. This is a little bit of my background, just to give some context to our conversation today. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, graduated from Butler University here in Indianapolis, where I live now, and then graduated dental school in May of 2017 from IU. And then, like I said, signed that lease for my startup space the day after. And it took some time, and I'll tell you why, but April 4th, 2018 was the opening day for my startup, the Dentists at Gateway Crossing. This is a picture of the outside of our building, pictures of the office, some old pictures, actually. One of my passions in the lifestyle practice is to hopefully help dentists like you all, future dentists, avoid mistakes, avoid the tough life lessons that inevitably happen as you're pushing yourself and early on in your career. So my story is kind of unique in that, when I was in your all's shoes, about third year of dental school, honestly, I just got the business of dentistry bug. I wanted to know everything. I knew I wanted to own or start a practice soon after school, but I was all in on Dental Town. The Facebook groups weren't a big thing then. Dental Town was pretty huge. networking, just doing everything I could. And so I found a gentleman who was big on dental startups and was big on personal finance, and he had a business and a course that he was running. So I reached out to him, and he gave me the opportunity to come actually down to Texas to learn and attend the seminar. And we hit it off, and his big thing was starting practices from scratch. He was very, very passionate about it. And so I was all in. We hit it off, and he basically told me, I'm going to help you build this practice. I'm going to help you start a practice from scratch. You're going to pay me to do it, essentially like a coaching relationship. But I'm going to help you do this. And I said, cool. I was young. I was naive. It sounded great. So as I'm going through now fourth year of dental school, I've visited his practice a couple times, and going through the initial planning stages. And it's funny looking back, there were definitely some red flags, just in the thoroughness that he had, and some of the promises that were made. But as I got along, he was still there with me, kind of every step of the way. I signed the lease, as I mentioned, the day after I graduated, and really at that point, and then over the next few weeks, this guy just disappeared. So he was gone. You've probably heard this story on the podcast if you listen, but he was gone. And I realized after like I said, about 3 weeks after I signed the lease, and when you do that, the clock is ticking, right? Rent's going to be due in 6 months. I'm like, I got to figure out how to do this. This guy's gone. I went through this moment of, holy crap, I've got $450,000 in student loan debt. I've got, potentially $400,000 for this practice, and I've got nothing right now. So I had to figure it out. And by hard work, by all the preparation I had done, of course, a little bit of luck, that never hurts. We are where we are today. But I look back on that, and although I'm not happy that it happened, it was extremely difficult and extremely stressful. I learned a ton. I learned how to be gritty. I learned how to figure it out. I learned how to make moves when your back's against the wall. And as you all get into ownership and you all follow your own paths and your own journeys, there's going to be tough times. But it all comes back to why I'm here talking to you tonight, is that I want to help you avoid some of these pitfalls and some of these mistakes. So 3 keys to tonight's discussion. Just 3 points I kind of want to hammer home. 3 things that are really important here. 1, I want you to own a practice as quickly as is practical after graduation. I think this is an easy one to get on board with, because you are not going to reach your goals, crush your debt, become the person and the professional that you could potentially be without owning your practice. We'll go through a financial example here in a few slides. But I know it doesn't feel like that long ago that I was in your all's shoes. You're thinking about what life is like after graduation, and right now a nice associate salary, even a small practice, like that's probably more money than you all have seen in your entire lives. And it was for me too. And it's really, really easy to get comfortable with that being the idea of the ceiling, the peak that you can reach in your career. And just know that your potential is almost unlimited as an owner compared to just being an associate in a practice. You have so much opportunity in those early years to push yourself to ownership and start setting yourself up for truly the rest of your career in your life. Number 2, find a coach or a mentor that you can trust. Don't find a guy like I found. I did a really bad job. But one of the things, like I mentioned, there's red flags, and Derek, Steve, and I all went through a similar scenario. Those 2 went through a scenario where they hired consultants early on in their career and in their practice who made promises to do a lot of things for them. And those types of relationships, they can be successful in the short term, but we all learned that there's really no one who's going to care about you and your practice and your life as much as you will. You've really got to take ownership of everything that you're trying to do. Like finding great people to push you along is what you want, but you want them to teach you how to fish and not give you a fish, right? Kind of like that analogy of where you want to be prepared to do this for the rest of your life and your career. It's really easy. You all are obviously very ambitious in being in this group and being on this call right now. And it's easy to start to think that you know a lot or you know everything, but you don't. And I don't either, which is why I have a coach. LeBron James has coaches. No one at the top of their craft or someone who's trying to get to the top of their craft doesn't have a coach. Obviously, I'm biased here because I work with dentists and I coach dentists, but this is something that we are so passionate about because a good coaching relationship will push you through the glass ceilings that you've set for yourself. It'll push you out of your comfort zone. And that brings me to kind of key number three, and point number three for tonight is just be constantly pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Progress does not happen when you're comfortable. And with everything that we talk about tonight and that you all learn about with ownership and making progress in your careers, if it were easy, everybody would do it. It's true. I mean, if something were easy to do, everyone would have an awesome life. Everyone would have an awesome practice. So really, it's just a matter of, are you willing to put in the work and sacrifice to have that extraordinary life? I talk about the beginning of my practice all the time. You know, we talked about before doors are open, but for me, that first year, and my wife can reflect because, you know, we were just dating at that point. That first year was immensely stressful, not just from the standpoint of trying to get the practice open and successful, but the time that was involved and the effort that was involved. Once doors opened and, you know, we realized the sky wasn't falling, you know, we were profitable, and that's a huge step in a startup. It was then, oh my gosh, this is a lot of work to keep this going, to systemize this, to learn from my own mistakes. And it was about 6 months in when I finally said, you know what, I'm doing great here. I could probably figure this out on my own, but I just want someone to work with. And that's how I found Justin, who started the lifestyle practice. That's how I found him to be my coach. And then he passed the torch and the baton on to me with TLP as he exited. But I realized that I needed help, and he was one of the best influences I've ever had in my life of pushing me out of my comfort zone. So whether you're doing that with someone else or yourself, always be working towards getting out of your comfort zone. So Franklin suggested that I pose this question, you know, why should you own as soon as possible out of school? Like, what is the true benefit? So let's look at an example of a rough example of what this looks like. And I realize that this is pretty basic, and I realize that some of you all will understand this perfectly and some of you all might not, and that's okay. If you have any questions about this type of discussion or anything we talk about towards the end, feel free to ask. So let's use a rough example. If you are an associate at $1 million practice does $1 million a year, and that could be you could conceivably have a job like this right out of school at let's say it's a corporate practice. You're the only doctor there. So in most practices, this is grossly oversimplified, but usually like around 30% of the production for a year comes from the hygiene team. So let's say 30% of the annual production is from the hygienist. You don't see a dime of that because you're not the owner. And you produce $700,000 of dentistry that year. Pretty solid for a young dentist. So you're paid, you know, it's pretty common to get paid about 30% of your production. So you make a really nice salary, a really nice pay of $210,000. So let's contrast that with if you were the owner of this practice. $1 million practice, same breakdown of hygiene and doctor production. You're making money off of the hygienists and their production as an owner, right? You're taking everything that comes into the practice, and everything that's left over after you pay the expenses of the practice is yours. That's being a business owner. So let's say that the overhead costs or the overall expenses for that year is $600,000, 60%. That is uber achievable with a practice this size. And I would argue that you could get that a lot lower, your costs, but let's just put it here for round numbers and to simplify things. Your pay in this case for doing pretty much the exact same thing. Now you've got to manage the practice, obviously, and do the things that it takes to run a business, but your pay is almost double. It's $400,000 before you're paying on the loan that you have to buy that practice. Now, let's say you bought this $1 million practice for $700,000. So you've got loan payments every month that are coming out of the money you take home. Well, you're still making about $300,000 that year. But not only that, and this is something that I think is really important to understand. If you purchase a practice or you buy a practice and you grow it, you are developing an asset that's worth something. So in this case, if this is a 10-year loan, you're paying on this loan for 10 years, all of a sudden you've got a valuable asset, a dental practice that's hopefully grown and is worth more than what you bought it for at the start. So that's something that we don't want to leave out of this equation. And in my case, or in the case of Derek and Steve, you buy a practice or you start a practice that's, you know, worth X, and you grow it to 5 times X or whatever that is. I mean, that's a significant thing that can be a part of your plans in the future as a dentist. So don't forget about that. That's a really important part of the equation. So I thought this was a fun slide to think about. So like, why wouldn't you own early in your career. And so these are some of the things, and I guess I'll call them excuses, that I hear a lot of the time. I don't mean to sound harsh, but um, you might feel that you're not ready clinically. Speed, experience, dealing with certain types of cases. There's lots of things I hear. You might feel like you're not ready to lead a team. You might feel like you're not ready to live in one area for an extended period of time. I mean, that is something we want to think about. You might want to go have fun and party and live like a rich doctor or pretend that you're a rich doctor. These are all things I hear. And the fact is, these all can be addressed now and early on in your career through your own hard work, your own learning. You're seeking out this type of information to help make these not excuses for you to own early in your career. Are there any other examples? And you all can be honest and open, and I think that'd be great. Are there any other examples of why you're thinking, okay, I really might not want to own early on in my career? Any other roadblocks or things that you guys are running into now?
Can you explain how the not ready clinically is not like a valid excuse? Because I feel like that one's kind of like that's the one
Yeah.
that I'm kind of using,
Mhm.
and I thought that was kind of valid. That's why most people do the associateship then ownership.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a very valid thing, Avi. Like it's not of all of these things on this slide, I say it's like the least that's an excuse, if you will. But I think a short associateship or a short burst of I'm doing a lot of dentistry, I'm getting my feet underneath me in as a clinician is the way to think about it. Not, and I'll touch on this in a little bit, but like not, oh, I need to find a mentor who's going to gradually coach me up over years and years, and I'm going to buy them out. It just, I've seen that type of relationship or expectation quite a bit, and it just doesn't really come to fruition. And it's just not needed, you know? So yeah, that's it. It's probably harsh to call that an excuse, but it's more just at some point, there's never going to be a perfect time, right? There's never going to be that perfect moment where you feel, okay, I know everything that I need to know. I'm perfectly comfortable. Let's make this jump. So does that kind of answer your question?
Totally, yeah.
Cool.
Anthony said something in the comments
Oh, cool. Yeah.
about something about spending money that you don't have can be
Yeah.
intimidating.
Yeah, that's a really good argument. And anytime you're doing something like this is different than going out and buying a Porsche the day you graduate. Say, oh, hey, I made it, right? Like that's a depreciating asset. That is not making you money. If you have the right advisors, if you're working on yourself, you're trying to understand the business of dentistry, trying to find a practice that suits your needs, this is an investment. It truly is. It's something that's going to make you money in the way that we just talked about. Now, I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself with the presentation, but we don't want to, I'm not telling you all to run out and buy the first practice that you find and pay whatever you want for it. And dental practice ownership is guaranteed cash cow. Not true. I've worked with dentists and seen practices that are, you'd probably be better off in an associateship, quite frankly. But finding the right one, pushing yourself, to grow that practice or to do the things you need to do to make the owner income and money that we saw in the last slide, that's a great investment of your funds. So Anthony, that's a really good question. And in anything that you do in business, you want to try to decrease the risk as much as possible. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. And that's kind of a good segue into the next chunk of what we'll talk about is what do we do right now? Like what can you all do right now to start to feel prepared for something like this? So like I said, hard truth, there will never be a perfect time. There will be lifestyle things. There will be, family things. There will be, oh, I'm not sure if I'm ready. There will always be that. There's never going to be a perfect time for anything. And dental practice ownership is one of those things. Like I said, another truth, you will never feel completely ready. It's just how it goes. So it's knowing deep down that you've done everything you can to prepare and then making that leap. There is some aspect of building your parachute on the way down after you've jumped out of the plane. Like there is that feeling with this, and we all have that feeling. So don't feel like that you're the only person who feels that way. We want to be calculated in this, but we want to get into ownership as quickly as we can because we're basically just ripping off the Band-Aid. We're saying, you know what, this is going to be hard. It's going to be an adjustment no matter what. Let me just rip this Band-Aid off early in my career so I can be set up for the rest of my career. So like I said, if I were in your shoes, we've got kind of 5 main bullet points here to talk about. But if I were in your shoes now, so number 1, get your finances in order. this is super important. My disclaimer here is that I'm not a financial advisor and this is not financial advice. So Anthony, this is kind of touching on, I guess, what you talked about. So this is my net worth a month after dental school, and I'm sure you all like get that same feeling when you look at your loan statements in your bank account. Like we are when we get out of dental school, we are poorer than the guy who's asking for money on the side of the highway when you get off the exit. Like that is true. Now we have awesome earning potential as dentists. We do. So like it's not all doom and gloom. I'm not trying to say that that's the case, but we have to realize where we're at financially. But if it's between buying a new car, a depreciating asset, and you're deciding whether to do that or to invest in yourself and invest in your education of the business of dentistry or in CE for yourself or purchasing a practice, maybe building a personal emergency fund, paying down your debt, and delaying gratification in the early stages of your career, there's a very obvious correct choice between those two options. So like I said, this is not financial advice officially, but upon graduation, if you intend to start a practice or buy a practice, so I always recommend that you try to do this before paying down your student loans or refinancing. Repay is a good option for that first year. So basically, it's income based on your last tax year. So when you graduate and you show the government that you didn't have any income last year, you basically can avoid paying down your student loans and instead invest in, like I said, saving cash and potentially investing in your business. Now, just to be really, really clear, I'm not telling you to not to totally ignore your student loans. I loved having the flexibility by choosing this option. So I was still paying as if I was required to pay whatever the student loan payment was, but there wasn't that pressure to do so. So if you're financially responsible and you can do that, you have the willpower to do that, I think it's a no-brainer. Because right at the beginning, I just socked away a bunch of cash, and then the required payment was still zero for a year with this option, but I'm still making payments as I went along, just with as cash flow would permit. So, like I said, not a financial advisor. Do your own research on the repayment options, but long story short, just get ready to live like a student. It's going to be one of the best things that you can do and the best mindset you can get into as an owner. We talked about delayed gratification and how it's one of the biggest keys to success early on in your career. And you just can't have extraordinary things and live an extraordinary life without putting in that extraordinary effort. One of the big things that we have to deal with from a personal finance standpoint as doctors is we've already lost time to let our earnings compound and work for us. So our peers who, went to undergrad and got out and did whatever they did with their careers, hopefully they're like investing that money and starting to build their personal wealth the moment they get out of school. Well, for us, we have 4 more years of dental school, maybe more if we have to go to a grad program to get in. Then maybe we've got specialty training too. Our doctor counterparts who have residency and that's even longer than ours, they're even in a tougher spot. And we've got a lot of debt with right now high interest rates. So I like I said, I don't say this to be doom and gloom. I mean, we've got awesome earning potential as dentists, but we've got to put that earning potential to work quickly. Number 2, if I were in your shoes, I would be pushing myself clinically in dental school. And yes, I know that that's obvious, but the more you can push yourself clinically in dental school, the easier it will be to get into ownership and be productive and run a productive practice. So while you're in dental school and soon after, if I was in your shoes, I would be getting exposure and practice to doing everything. I would be that pesky student. I'm sure you all can like think of that person in your class who like wants to talk to every professor and do everything and shadow everyone. But like you probably should be kind of like that person. Because when you're in school, you have the time to do this. And you basically get free practice, free exposure. Well, not free because you're paying for it, but you can do this a lot more easily when you're in school or soon after. Once you get into the real world, and whether you're an associate for a short time or an owner, like it costs a lot more time and energy to do these things. Plus, a lot of CE courses are cheaper when you're in school or just out of school. And like I said before, you have the time to do them more than you do when you're an owner and you're out of practice. In what I see in a lot of practices, being able to do bread and butter dentistry but do it well, get people out of pain, and refer normal procedures as little as possible is such a valuable skill to have. So, extractions, endo, in my mind, implants, like simple implants nowadays, those are bread and butter dentistry. And it's really not that hard to get comfortable with these, especially while you're in school. If you get out and you're out a few years to then learn how to remove a tooth while you're a practicing dentist, it's kind of dicey. Like, how do you do that? You don't want to practice on your patients. So, like my personal example, and I know this is different in every school and what you're able to do, but I became really good friends with the undergrad oral surgery director and started just by saying, "Hey, can I just shadow what the undergrads, so the D3s and D4s were doing? Can I just shadow them for a while?" This was like late D2 year. So I did that and then ended up just hanging out and like then helping the D3s and D4s extract teeth or giving them advice or stepping in to do things for them. Then that graduated to, hey, can I just shadow with the oral surgery residents? Wasn't doing as much work there, but just like getting exposure to how they work through problems and situations to remove teeth. And it was one of the best things I ever did. It was free. I had the time and got out of school with, really a solid understanding of surgery. So whatever that is in your own interests and in your school, I'd say go for it, but just push yourself to do as much as you can while you're in school. It's such an important thing to do. And then I think when you get out of school, working in a busy practice for about a year, can be a little bit less, is one of the best things you can do as well. Sometimes I'd say usually this means a corporate dental practice. Uh, you'll be busy. You'll probably make the most money there, get the most experience, and corporate dental practices get a bad rap in our world, but they know what they're doing and how to run an efficient practice. Now, I'm not telling you to run your practices like a corporate dental office and do a lot of the things that they do, but there are a lot of things that they do well. And I say this next line kind of tongue in cheek, but you most likely do not need a mentor to learn how to do all this. When I say initially that I want you to find a coach or a mentor, I want you to find someone who's going to push you along, um, and not give you a fish, but teach you how to fish. So just do not fall into the trap of entering private practice or entering an associateship where you're just not busy. You're not really making that great of an income, and there's just this loose promise from an owner doctor to say, yeah, I'll kind of mentor you and then sell you my practice in a few years. If you have something like that lined up and you think it's going to be productive, I really do hope it is. Getting as much experience soon after school as possible is the best way to go. And while you're in school and soon after, increase your business acumen as much as you can. There's a lot of different ways to do this. You all are doing it right now. And the next point, number 3, I think will help you as well. So number 3, read and educate yourself now. As Derek, Steve, and I, we get together and we talk quite a bit, and we just had a retreat, and we just kind of talked about like, the state of dentistry and dental students nowadays, and we realized that like we did a ton of reading and research just because we wanted to get as much information as possible when we were in your shoes. So I think it's awesome what you all are doing with this business organization, but just continue to push yourselves to read and educate yourselves. What I did here was, and I'll pause this for a second if you all want to take a picture of this. These are just 10 books that I think if you read these 10 books and you could read each one of these, man, it would take you could do it in a week of each of them, but I'd say you could read one a month. And this would be just as good or better than any sort of business education you could get from a university. It really would. These books will help you not just with personal finance, but with how to run a business, how to lead people, how to delegate, how to manage, how to sell, how to help your patients get the treatment that they need. Some of these authors, Grant Cardone, some of the other ones, they might get a bad rap. They're a little bit over the top, but these are some of the best books. I couldn't encourage you all more to just read these. Order them, read them. Books are some of the highest ROI items that you all could have in your education right now. And you're never going to get this type of education from anyone inside the 4 walls of your dental school. It's not a knock on your school. It's just how that's how dental schools work, right? No one's going to educate you like these books and these people will. So, um, snap a picture and send it to anybody who might have missed this, because these are all awesome. So number 4, surround yourself with the right people. It's true. You are the saying is cliche, but you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And what's kind of cool in 2024 is that you don't have to be around these people in real life for these 5 people, if you will, to be your circle. These could be people online. These could be the podcasts. Maybe Derek, Steve, and I are some of these people in your life if you're listening to our podcast, and I think that's awesome. That's what we want to be. Groups like the one that you're in, those are the right people who are pushing themselves forward. This is a cool story about, I guess, Derek and I. When we were both in dental school, Derek started a private group on Dental Town called Ambitious Dental Students, kind of similar to what you all have going on here, but it was a national thing. And it was just, hey, we're all dental students who we want to get into ownership. We want to learn about the business of dentistry. And it was, we had some recent business owners, practice owners coming on there to tell us how they did it. Derek was kind of leading the discussion a lot of the time, passing along resources. There were some guys in there who were, learning how to evaluate practices and how much they're worth. Just all sorts of awesome stuff. But we look back now, and Derek and I were in that group, and then the other people who were there, everybody has found some level of success in what they're interested in. And we realized that we weren't doing this to necessarily try to accomplish the things that we all have accomplished to this point. We were just like hungry for knowledge. We were hungry to learn. And part of that was just being around each other and interacting. So, there's a link, there's going to be a link here at the end. You can join our Facebook group, subscribe to our podcast, whatever you do here, doesn't matter to me, but find those people who are moving towards common goals. I'm not telling you to ditch your friends, wear a suit to school each day. Like, I'm not telling you to do that, but like really do think about this and the people in your life. A saying that I always think of, and it rings true, is if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Truly, like you'll go through phases in your life where you may realize, okay, I'm learning, I'm productive. Like these are the people I need to be around. And then if you're thinking about this, you may think, you know what, like I've got to make some changes here. I've got to continue to push myself and grow. And having that growth mindset is so important. And it all starts with surrounding yourself with the right people and good influences. And so number 5 here, before we kind of wrap things up and we'll get into Q&A time, is I think it's important that we all accept the realities of modern dentistry. And what I mean by this is, I was in dental school not too long ago. And so I remember the picture that was painted for me by the professors and the people inside the 4 walls of those dental schools. And they might like try to slap me for these slides, but there's lots of things that are said, just like empty platitudes and things about the nature of dentistry and the world of dentistry that just aren't really true. And so what I mean by that is I always think about when I'm going through dental school and I'm being told that, being a great clinician and doing great work for patients is the number one thing. And if you do that, everything else will take care of itself. I heard that all the time. I don't know if you guys still hear some version of that. But don't get me wrong. Obviously, taking care of patients is number one. Like doing great work for people, that is number one. No doubt about it, no matter what we talk about tonight. But your success won't be determined by if you can do the best crown prep in town or the best crown prep in your class or the most perfect looking endo with the perfect sealer puff. But truly, your career success will be defined by how well you can communicate with people, patients, team, how well you can empathize with them, understand where they're coming from, get into their mind, how well you can lead a team and lead other people, and how much and how often you push yourself out of your comfort zone. I know I've said that a number of times, but it is so true. And like I said, I'm not saying that you don't have to be a great dentist to be a great practice owner. Like that, you want to be a great clinical dentist, and that's very, very, very important. It's the most important. But I'm saying that there are other factors that are just as important in your success in your career, both, financially and just throughout your entire ownership of a dental practice. There are other things that are just as important, and we'll determine that. I know I've said it a bunch, but your comfort zone, you've got to get out of it as much as you can. And this is something that, it worked out for me as a dentist, but it's something that I kind of grappled with quite a bit when I was in school in your shoes. In that, I got into dentistry. I heard that I was kind of a science nerd, math nerd, and got good grades. So I'm like, all right, we'll be a dentist. And I hear they take off Fridays, which is cool. Um, and then you kind of go on and you get into dental school and I started to realize like there are a lot of things here that I didn't really sign up for this. Like I didn't think this was going to be part of this. And I was the first dentist in my family and I didn't have you know, a family member pushing me towards that. I didn't really know anything about it before starting to shadow and maybe late in undergrad. But I realized, wow, there are like so many other things that I have to do as a dentist besides be a dentist if I'm going to own a practice, right? I got to manage people. I got to hire people. I got to fire people. I got to know what to say when someone, when an employee is crying in my office. Like there's so many things that you have to do that don't revolve around dentistry. And I think trying to accept that as much as possible with where you all are now, if you're ready to get in ownership, accepting that that's the reality, will prepare you better for the realities of ownership. I'll admit when I started my practice and I was a very young dentist and leader of people, I had this ideal version of what I thought it might be like. And it took a lot of time and learning. And I wish I had read those books and done more thinking when I was in school to really be prepared for what it was going to be like. So in my opinion, this is the way. Like this is the playbook or a playbook that I would go by if I were in your all shoes. After graduation, I would look for dental practices producing under $1 million with opportunity for growth, or find an awesome place to start a practice. And I would find some trusted advisors to help me with this. I would vet them. I would not try to do this all on my own because I would know that even though I've got a mountain of debt, I'm about to have an even higher mountain of debt with buying or starting a practice, that finding the right people to work with is going to be much more productive in the long run. I would educate myself in the dental and non-dental ways that we already discussed and work my tail off right now and right after school to in an associateship and doing all the things that we've already talked about. And then I would push myself to ownership without being reckless soon after graduation. The reason I mentioned looking for practices producing under $1 million is let's be real. This is us not being reckless about a dental practice purchase soon after graduation. Practices that are doing much more than that, unless you're just crushing it in your clinical skills, might be tough for you to replicate, right? It might be difficult for you to do whatever those practices are doing. So looking at individual practices, what I would try to do is I would try to find a practice that is doing six figures in some way. I think Derek and Steve, when they bought theirs right out of school, were doing anywhere from like $400,000 to $600,000. And they had dentists that were slowing down, maybe underdiagnosing the things that really needed to be done, being watchodontists, if you will. And they said, you know what, even though I'm fresh out of school, I have the opportunity to take great care of patients here and do what they need and recommend what they need, and then grow this practice as I continue to up my speed and my skills. I wouldn't want to see you all jump into a multi-million-dollar practice, which the bank probably wouldn't let you do. But I wouldn't want you all to be naive and think that that's something that you should do without for sure knowing that you've got those skills. So when you're fresh out and possibly in a busy associateship, push yourself to ethically do as much dentistry as you can and do it well, because the bank will then look at those records of how much dentistry you've done and utilize that to say, okay, you've done this amount of dentistry in your associateship. Well, here's the type and size of practice that we'll finance for you, that will let you buy. So important to get that record of what you can do as a dentist started soon after you get out of school. You guys can do this. You don't have to be special to do this. You've got to work your tail off. You've got to be smart, not be reckless, do all the things that we talked about, but I know that you can do this. If you want to stay in touch with us at TLP, definitely jump in our private Facebook group. A lot of good resources there. You can join our email list by clicking on this link. And when you submit a contact, you could just say, hey, join in the email list, and you'll get our updates. It's usually podcast updates and some really useful content. Definitely, number one, I would say is subscribe to our podcast if you're not already. And then you can always email me. That's my email, and it's at the end of the presentation too. You can email me now. You can email me down the road. myself, Derek, and Steve, like this is what we're passionate about. Obviously, we still practice dentistry, we still do that, but we are immensely passionate about helping future dentists like you all and getting a fair shake and avoiding the mistakes that we made and that we see other people making too.
All right.
Awesome. So yeah, I've got time to I see Anthony, you've got a question in here already. But yeah, time to open it up for Q&A and
Well, I'd love to hear Anthony's or an answer to Anthony's question after. Sorry, Anthony, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. I think he pretty much touched on it, but if you want to elaborate even more, I'd appreciate that too.
yeah. So your question was elaborating how we can analyze a practice that has an opportunity for growth. So yeah, the things that I already mentioned, if I were a young doc and I were trying to find a practice with potential for growth, I would be looking at what is that, and this is all pretty common stuff. Like if you find a good advisor, whether it's, lawyer, accountant, us, like we do this all the time, but like find a practice with a doctor who is not doing as much as they could or should. If you all are pushing yourselves and you're getting out into a productive associateship right out of school, even if that's for like a few months and you can work with a local bank or you find the perfect practice and you can get financing, which is possible, you have the ability to do enough dentistry to have a practice that size, and then that practice can grow with you. It works really, really well if you find a practice about in that size. Those are the biggest things I'd say is just you're looking for a practice where you can potentially do more dentistry than the owner over time, or they're underdiagnosing, or there's just some really low-hanging fruit to growth.
Sweet. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I've got a question for
Yeah.
you. When would you recommend that we reach out to you guys? Like, I know that different groups offer maybe pre-ownership coaching and stuff like that, but
Mhm.
I know obviously you guys focus on the actual owner.
Yeah.
But what would you recommend for someone who's in the process of looking, and
Sure.
maybe like if they're a DS4, like I'm about to be, and don't have a lot of money.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So, and we get that for sure. What I would say is, the academy we get great feedback on, and that's something that anybody who works with us, we include academy access for life. So I would say the best time to reach out is whenever you're ready to start considering practices. That's the best time to reach out. So if we don't we do, I guess you could call it pre-ownership coaching, but it's more like practice analysis in that it's kind of the first step of a coaching relationship. And so we're able to say, okay, here's either the exact practices that you're looking at, or here's what we want you to go off and look for. Once you find a practice and it's great and we agree on that and we've coached you through the purchase of that practice and the right questions to ask, the right things to be asking your lawyer, the right due diligence, the reports to run. Once you've gotten through that, and then we're able to, help coach you on how to get into that practice and actually like lead a team and do the dentistry, then that's where, you've obviously, you're going to start seeing the fruits of your labor if you've picked the right practice. And then that's where we can, work together going forward. So, find a coach and a mentor that vibes with you and what you're looking for. Like just, it doesn't have to be us, just find somebody that you trust. Good
Awesome.
question.
Thanks.
Yeah, I see the chat here. So Tyson, what's the best way to start looking at and evaluating practices? Good question. I think being as connected as you can in the dental space is important. So that could be having your name on the radar of some brokers. It's truly how much you're willing to hustle too. Like sending letters to doctors in your area can be productive. A really productive thing if you're saying, okay, I really want to practice in this area of town, you can go online and look up all the dentists in that area, try to see kind of the approximate age of those dentists. You can look up their license and see how long they've been practicing, see which ones might be good opportunities. And you could walk in and just shake their hand and say hello. Being in tune with brokers, supply reps, just cold reaching out to some of these people. Hey, I'm a D3, I'm a D4. This is something I really want to do. I don't have financing yet, but like I would love for you to just keep me in the loop on things. Any opportunities, keep me in mind. They might talk to a dentist who says, yeah, Bob, I'm ready to hang it up in about 3, 4 years. And they may say, oh, you know what? I've got this guy, Tyson. He might be looking around that time. Do you want to connect? And that's a true abundance mindset with this, and just always having your door open to conversations, I think is one of the best ways you can do it. I think some of the best transitions and the best values that I've had, clients and friends find is just through those sources, like I mentioned, like kind of hustling, connecting, realizing that someone might be ready to retire in a few years or soon, and making connections in that way. Being creative, pushing yourself, hustling, it's usually a solution for a lot of things. So, good question.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Anthony, what are your thoughts on acquiring a practice that is old? Panel from 1990. Nice. Chairs are 15 years old, 5 ops. But you think if you put a lot of money into it, you can make it considerably more profitable. Too risky, or a good move to maybe look into flipping a practice to open up your own practice eventually? Then Tyson, our podcast guru, I love it. They just did an episode on something similar, episode 198. Yeah, so that's that's the kind of stuff you want to be looking for. So you want to be looking for where you can add value in a practice to make it more profitable. Someone I'm working with in Arizona right now, it's a good example. Practice hasn't raised their fees in 15 years, hasn't renegotiated their insurance fees, which you can do and should do every couple years. You just pay a service to do this. We looked at the doctor to hygiene ratio, and the hygiene ratio was higher than that kind of 30% range that we saw, which tells us that this doctor should probably be doing more dentistry with the amount of patients that are coming through. And we saw kind of a similar thing. Old equipment, not something that necessarily needs to be changed, but it's really, really easy to add a few things. Like we said, intraoral cameras, an intraoral scanner. You can get those for under 10 grand now, and just completely blow the socks off of patients when you buy a practice. They're like, holy moly, that's my tooth. Those are the types of things I think that you want to be looking out for. And then, you just don't want to, you have to factor in, like, obviously the price of the practice and the valuation of the practice, which is, we could talk for another hour or two about that. As far as maybe looking like flipping a practice, I think looking for a practice and investing, whether you acquire or whether you start a practice, there's so much sweat equity that goes into it. You might be, we talk about this on the podcast. You might be have multi-practice aspirations. You might have all sorts of crazy business aspirations. And if you do, that's awesome. But I know that for 99% of us, having a really profitable one practice location and being there and not doing things like flipping practices and opening other locations, doing that is the best, or one of the best ways to go. So that's a long-winded way of saying, like, I wouldn't try to like buy a practice and say, I'm going to grow this for a little bit and then flip it and then open one. Like, I would try to be really set in your plan, because there's so much sweat equity that goes in, and you're just going to lose that if you say buy a practice here and then, move in a year and a half and go somewhere else. I guess there could be value there, but I think you probably want to try to get it right the first time. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. Now, there's some cool things you can do to continue to grow a practice. If you grow to the point where you're running out of chairs, you can always, I have a client who just added on to their building. So instead of like flipping a practice or quitting on what they had, going somewhere else or opening a practice or building a whole new multi-million-dollar building, he just broke out the back wall of his office, went from 4 ops to 8 ops, and he's set for a long, long time. There's opportunity to acquire the charts and the patients from some of these older practices to grow your practice too. That doesn't involve like transacting a whole different practice.
I have a question, just another thing about like what like the lifestyle practice, has to offer and stuff like that. So
yeah,
I guess going back to the question of the pre-owner, do y'all do due diligence with us? Like, are you going to be walking through the numbers, the P&L statements, stuff like that? Are you going to be looking at the like the demographics of the area? And
Mhm.
is it something that you three do, or do you have people that you guys work with? How does that look like?
Yeah, good question. So we do that ourselves. That's one thing that we've tried to stay really true to is not farming out coaching or these types of things to other people. If someone's listening to me on the podcast or Derek or Steve, like we all want to work with people directly. We don't want you to be with a consultant, right? We don't want that. So yeah, we do that together, doing due diligence. And the P&Ls are they're very important. Like we've got to make sure that you're getting a good, you're looking at opportunities and the potential long term. And that does involve an accountant and a lawyer. Like we don't act as an accountant and a lawyer because you need those
Mhm.
two people in the deal too. But there's so many things that are kind of like in between the lines
Right.
that are really important that you just won't get from looking at the P&L. Like I mentioned that example, the example of internal cameras, insurance fees, like that type of stuff. I mean, it's crazy the little things that you can find.
Mhm.
One thing that we do have coming up is we've ran a couple mastermind groups for owners that have been um, really awesome, really, really awesome. And I think the next one that we do um, or that I do is likely going to be for associates um, to kind of cover that niche that you mentioned, Franklin, like that pre-owner area. But you guys are doing the right things. You're just soaking up as much information as you can from different resources. You're figuring out which ones you like, which ones seem legit, which ones don't.
Mhm.
And that's the best thing you can do right now. I think it's great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. I
Cool, guys.
appreciated it, Matt.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
This was awesome.
I appreciate you guys. Like I said, the best thing that you can do is what you're doing right now. If you like what we're saying and what we're doing, just share it
Mhm.
with a friend. Share the podcast with somebody. That's like the best thing you could do to say thanks. I hope you all stay in touch and keep us in the loop on how things are going.
Sicker than your average. Sicker than your average.